I want to point something out. In both of your answers, there was a certain word missing there, and that's investment. In the 1980s, people believed that when they bought a house, they could assume a certain degree of appreciation every single year. Has that feeling changed, especially after this shock of a downturn?
No, the bottom line is that your home will be not only one of the biggest financial purchases you ever make, but one of the best investments that you make. You pay down the mortgage over your 20 or 30 years, and you have a tremendous asset that will allow you to do so many other things as you mature and go into your golden years. So they recognize the fact that it's an investment, that if they're there for the long haul, it will endure any of the real estate cycles that we may encounter, and they do see it as an investment.
You know, I would add that a colleague of mine at Harvard, Ed Glazer, recently had an article, an op-ed in the Globe, in which he basically was saying, you know, we've oversold the idea of home ownership. More people should be renting like we used to. And certainly there are people who should be renting rather than buying, particularly if they're moving around quickly or they have a very unstable income. But I think one of the things we have to remember, and it's the other interpretation of the word investment, Anthony, and that is that people who buy homes stabilize their own communities, much more so than renters. I think I was telling somebody here that, again, my Detroit story, right after World War II, the mayor of Detroit, a guy named Albert Cobo, if you know Cobo Hall, which is our big convention center in Detroit, didn't like the idea that all of these hillbillies had moved in Detroit from places like West Virginia and Tennessee and Kentucky to work in the war plants, and lots of African Americans had moved up from Mississippi, Alabama, and so forth. And we had a lot of housing construction in Detroit, quickly built to house people so they could work in the war plants. After the war, Cobo was able to get eminent domain to literally just bulldoze whole swaths of the city. So it looked a lot like it does today. And he expected that developers would come in and build new housing in the city. Well, they didn't. They built it in the suburbs. This is 1945 through 1965. And that land lay fallow, and it was a real black mark on the city. My union, the UAW, decided that it would build housing. And in fact, my father, who was a vice president of the UAW, was in charge of that. And they built a huge project called the Martin Luther King Homes and made it all rental. Detroit Edison said, okay, if the UAW will do it, we'll do it. And they built a project right next to the Martin Luther King Homes, and the only difference was home ownership. Within 5 years, you could tell the difference, which was the home rental and what was the home ownership. And it just stabilized one of the neighborhoods and the other neighborhood not. And there's something about owning a piece of the rock that says, I want to make sure that my whole community prospers because it will secure the investment in the rock I have.
And Anthony, if I could just add one other thing. In 2007, the National Association of Realtors did a study. And let me first disclose, I am a landlord. I rely on renters to make a living. But what they did was they looked at renters compared to owners and their net worth. The net worth of a renter was $5,100. The net worth of a homeowner was $234,000. This is in 2007. Prices have come down a little bit, but that's 46 times more the net worth that a homeowner has compared to a renter. So I'd like to think that that number, 46 times, is the same. It's just a lower amount. So there is something to be said about home ownership.
John.
I want to change directions and ask Barry a question about the national mortgage market, maybe talk about some elephants in the room that we seem to be ignoring, and that's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I think yesterday the New York Stock Exchange said that they're going to delist those shares, but they were placed in conservatorship, and essentially we have a nationalized mortgage market. I don't know the numbers, but something like 90% of the mortgages last year were backed by Fannie or Freddie or the FHA. What is the end game for these two companies?
You're a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but there is no doubt that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac played a critically important role in helping build America's middle class, homeowners who have real stability in their community. And we've been a little too quick to say these were disastrous institutions because of what happened after 2008. If Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac become, fully privatized, or if in fact they disappear altogether, we're going to have to think about another institution for the secondary mortgage market in order to be able to have the kind of housing stock we're going to need to maintain a middle class in the country.
And along those lines, there's an old saying about tossing out the baby with the bathwater. There's no doubt that there are reforms that are needed. And as realtors, we see it, we acknowledge it, we push for those reforms. But let me give you a statistic. 5 years ago, during the housing boom, FHA was a very minor shareholder in the mortgages that were being issued. I think it was less than 5%. I can tell you that in the past 18 months, if it were not for FHA, the housing market would not be normalized or stabilized. And the statistic is somewhere between 60 and 70% of the mortgages were FHA mortgages. So the government did play a crucial role in stabilizing the real estate market. And so let's not just toss them out. Let's look at it, do a comprehensive reform, and get these things back on track because, as Barry said, if they're gone, something needs to step up and fill their shoes. And right now, we don't have anything in place.
That's 60 to 70% in the past 18 months.
Yes. Yeah.
FHA-backed loans. Yes, we have a question right back here. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Joe Doyle from Quincy. The question I want to ask, of the overall inventory itself, both locally and nationally, how much is that is actually being bought out by a foreign entity? People coming in on the cheaper dollar to buy out the inventory and be able to rehab it and then rent it out. In American dollars being converted to their home currency, being shipped overseas.
I don't have any hard and fast statistics for you, but what I can tell you in the resort areas, we're definitely seeing a foreign influx of dollars, especially down in Florida on a national scale. Florida's seen a tremendous amount from South America and from Europe. I'd like to say I could tell you about Cape Cod. I just don't know. And then I'm sure that there is some influx in the commercial markets. But again, I don't have hard and fast statistics. Barry?
We have quite a number of foreigners coming into Cape Cod now, particularly in Truro, mostly from New York.
Those darned foreigners, yes. And I also like to add that the dollar is not that cheap anymore.
That's right.
The dollar has dramatically gained in value, so real estate in this country to foreign investors is not such a deal anymore as values increase. Yes, we have a question right here in the corner. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I wanted to talk, just address a little more bank-owned properties. It's really a very mixed blessing. We found with our agency, some agents, you get to the end of the deal and then the banks are very disorganized and then they come in and they say, oh, we're reappraising that property. It's no longer that, the deal's off. So literally a week before they're closing, you have to scramble around. So any comments on that? That's the first thing. And you've talked about we really hit the bottom, but I don't think consumers feel that. They keep trying to the economy's so bad, I can get some, I'll wait, I'll get another $200,000 off this price. So those are my two questions.
I'll handle the bank-owned properties. I'll let Barry talk about the economy. Let me take it a step further. Let's say there's a bank-owned property where the copper's been stolen. Or I actually had a property that I purchased, the boiler was stolen. You can't get conventional financing in these circumstances. It sounds more like what you're going through is the house is intact and it's closer to the end and they're just doing a new appraisal to determine value. That's unfortunate if that's the case. You'd like to think that they would live by the contract that they signed and sell it for the price. But there are opportunities in bank-owned properties. And if you're in a position to be able to, one, be patient, and two, get the financing, you should give it serious consideration.
Barry?
All
Tony?
All I would say is don't bet against the Massachusetts economy. If you do, you're going to make a mistake. It's strong. It's getting stronger. We're seeing it in manufacturing for the first time. We certainly see it in healthcare. We see it in higher education. Northeastern University. We just had the best year in many, many years. We hired 102 new faculty this year. Part of the reason is that there were some weak schools in the area, Harvard, I think, which couldn't do any hiring because of their endowment problems. And so we were picking up people who would normally be going to Harvard who are thrilled to take a job at Northeastern. I hired 5 additional staff in the last 2 weeks. And we're just seeing a pickup that I'm seeing personally, but we're also seeing it when we go out and talk to manufacturers, or I talk with people in the healthcare industry, or I talk with people who are starting to see some real movement in the financial sector as well. We happen to have a good set of industries. Detroit doesn't. Florida doesn't. We do. You bet against it, you're going to lose.
Tony, what's your input on that?
Well, I actually, maybe to answer your question specifically, I think that's what the bank is experiencing. Because things are a little bit better, because those 30,000 jobs have happened, because 5 new people were hired, it takes a little bit of time for that to come through, and they're more confident that what they have is worth more than it was when they began selling it, and you know, that's how that process goes on.
Yes, we have a question right here. Yes, sir.
Good morning, John Reedy from Boston. I had a question for any of you to pick up. But supposing Governor Patrick and Speaker DeLeo and the President of the Senate said, what initiatives would you ask us to legislate to further enhance the Massachusetts job building? Looking at what we've done in Cambridge with drugs. You've mentioned pharma, not finance, but that's working well, and other technology. But what, in a dream world where the governor and the House and the Senate would work together, what would you do? What would you ask for? Probably start off with Professor Bluestein on this one.
Well, actually, I do ask the governor these things, and the Speaker and the Senate President. Number one is that we are doing some really good things in the state. We have a $1 billion life sciences center, which is making grants to individual researchers, to firms, to collaborations between universities and hospitals and firms. And we're actually hope to be doing an assessment of how well that is going. I would like to see the governor and the Speaker and the Senate President pay attention a little bit more to the manufacturing sector. We did a major report in 2008 called Staying Power, which basically said, we've given up on manufacturing, it's a mistake. It's the 4th largest sector in the economy, it's the 2nd largest payroll in Massachusetts, and it's coming back strong because we've learned our lessons, we've lost the stuff we're going to lose, but what's left is massive, powerful, and gaining strength. I also think that we have to get the governor and the Speaker and the President of the Senate to talk a little less. By the way, I can say the following because I have tenure, an endowed chair, and therefore lifetime security unless I burn down a few buildings at Northeastern. We spend too much time talking about 4-year colleges. We've got lots and lots of young people and others who need to go through community college. We need to have our vocational education system built. Believe it or not, despite the fact that we'll lose jobs in manufacturing, a few more between now and 2016, there'll be 100,000 job openings in manufacturing because of the retirees of this older generation. We're not training people for those jobs. And over again, we keep talking about 4-year education. By God, I love it. It pays my salary and my bills and helps pay my mortgage. But we have to pay a lot more attention to training the folks who are not going to go to a 4-year school, and that's 60% of our young people. Those would be for starters. Then we can talk about taxes and regulation.